So picture this. On one side of your mind, I want you to visualize a snow-covered, frozen solid backyard in Quebec, right in the dead of January.
Oh, brutal. Just completely locked in ice.
Exactly. I mean, the ambient air is pushing minus 20 degrees Celsius, and the frost line is buried deep into the soil. And then on the other side of your mental split screen, picture a perfectly glowing, vividly red, freshly cut, jammy Mediterranean fig.
That's quite the contrast.
It is, because biology dictates that a Mediterranean plant should absolutely die in that Canadian yard. It's the complete opposite of the sun-drenched hills of, California or Italy, where these things evolve.
Right, it shouldn't work.
But it does. Today, we are doing a deep dive into this centuries-old botanical anomaly. We're looking at one specific heritage fig that doesn't just, barely survive those winters. It actually uses the constraints of a short northern season to pump out a harvest that rivals anything grown in the Mediterranean.
It really is one of the most fascinating paradoxes in cold climate horticulture. You have this ancient plant, the Ronde de Bordeaux fig.
RDD, for short.
Right, RDB. And it's genetically wired for a completely different part of the world, but its specific physiological quirks make it an absolute champion for northern growers. And just to be clear for you listening, today's deep dive isn't about internet hype.
No, we are getting into the weeds today.
We are. This is a botanical masterclass. We're going to deconstruct the exact morphology, the history, and, the biochemical traits that let this legendary variety yield premium fruit where other elite varieties just completely fail.
So to frame our mission for anyone tuning in from Canada, the Pacific Northwest, or really anywhere haunted by late spring frosts, our thesis today is that the Ronde de Bordeaux might just be the single best main crop fig you can grow in your climate.
Unquestionably one of the best.
But to prove that, we have to start with the basics. It's a dark berry-type fig, but botanically, it has two critical classifications. It is a common fig, and it is a Unifera type.
Right.
So let's break that down, starting with a common designation, because, that is the non-negotiable barrier to entry, right?
Right. Exactly. When we say Ronde de Bordeaux is a common fig, we're talking about its reproductive biology. It is Parthenocarpic.
Okay, Parthenocarpic, meaning what exactly?
Meaning the tree is entirely self-fertile. It will swell, ripen, and mature its fruit without any requirement for pollination.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, in its native ancestral range, fig trees rely on this highly specialized relationship with a specific fig wasp to pollinate the interior flowers. But obviously, that micro-wasp cannot survive a Canadian winter.
Yeah, definitely not.
Right. It doesn't even exist in the Pacific Northwest. So if you plant a variety that requires that wasp, like a true Smyrna fig in Ontario, it'll grow beautifully all summer. It'll produce hundreds of little green figs.
And then what?
And then every single one of them will just drop off the tree in July because they weren't pollinated. But the common classification of RDB completely bypasses that.
So it basically, fakes its own pregnancy.
That's a great way to put it, actually. It pushes the fruit to full maturity purely on its own metabolic energy.
That is wild. Okay, so that's the common fig part. But the second classification, the Unifera trait, this is where I think we find the real cold climate superpower.
It absolutely is.
Because my understanding is that fig trees generally can produce 2 crops a year, right?
Yeah.
You have an early spring Breba crop on old wood, and then a late summer main crop on new green growth.
Yes, those are called Bifera types.
Right, Bifera. But RDB is Unifera, meaning it only produces that later main crop. Now, conventional logic tells me that if I have a super short summer, I desperately want a tree that gives me that early spring Breba crop, right? Just to maximize my harvest window.
You think so, yeah.
So why is it actually a good thing for cold climates that RDB just completely abandons the Breba crop?
Well, this is the critical difference between warm climate logic and cold climate biological reality. In a warm, stable climate, a Breba crop is a fantastic bonus. The tree uses stored carbohydrate reserves in its roots to push those early figs.
Because they actually formed the previous autumn, right?
Exactly. They sit dormant all winter. But think about the reality of a northern spring. It is highly volatile. You might get a warm week in April that wakes the tree up, followed immediately by a hard freeze in May.
Oh, right. The classic false spring.
Right. So if the tree is a Bifera, it wakes up during that false spring and just starts dumping massive amounts of stored energy into swelling those overwintering Brebas.
And then the freeze hits.
And the freeze hits. Those Brebas suffer thermal shock. The tree realizes it can't sustain them, and it aborts the crop. They all drop to the ground.
Oh, man. So it just wasted all that energy?
All of its most precious early season stored energy on a doomed endeavor. By the time the weather stabilizes in June, The tree is metabolically exhausted. It's weeks behind schedule.
Before the summer's even started.
Precisely. But a Unifera like Ronde de Bordeaux, it completely opts out of that trap. It concedes the early spring entirely.
So it just doesn't even try.
It lacks the genetic instruction to push a Breba crop, so it doesn't waste a single ounce of reserve energy on that old wood. When the soil finally warms up, 100% of the plant's root energy goes into an explosive flush of new vegetative growth.
Wow. It's like a hyper-efficient, singularly focused growth cycle. It's building the branches and the main crop all at once without any distractions.
Exactly.
It's incredible that a plant refuses to be tricked by a false spring. But, I mean, this hyper-efficiency didn't just spontaneously generate in a modern Canadian backyard.
No, not at all.
To understand why it's wired like this, we really have to look at where it came from. We have to trace it back to southwestern France.
We do. The history of the Bordeaux region perfectly explains why this fig behaves the way it does. We usually associate Bordeaux with, deep red wines, Cabernet Sauvignon.
Vineyards, right.
But the same climatic pressures that shaped Bordeaux wine shaped the Ronde de Bordeaux fig. The Romans brought fig genetics up into Gaul from the Mediterranean. But the climate of the French Atlantic coast is vastly different from the Mediterranean coast.
Yeah, the Mediterranean has those long, relentlessly hot, dry summers. But the Atlantic coast of France, it's maritime. It can be surprisingly cool, damp, and they get those early autumn rains sweeping in.
Right, and that climate created a strict evolutionary bottleneck. For centuries, fig cultivation there was maintained in monastery gardens and small rural farm orchards.
So these monks and farmers were basically acting as early horticultural scientists, right?
Exactly, though they were motivated purely by survival. They grew figs for dense calories, for preserving, for medicinal syrups. They could not afford to waste garden space on a temperamental Mediterranean variety that needed 6 months of heat.
Because if a tree didn't produce calories before those cold autumn rains hit, it was useless. They'd probably just chop it down for firewood.
That is exactly how agricultural selection works. Over centuries, they selectively propagated the trees that were relentlessly dependable, and the heritage variety that survived that rigorous selection was the Ronde de Bordeaux.
Because it naturally stayed compact and had that hyper-accelerated ripening timeline.
Yes, it could consistently deliver a heavy crop of mature fruit before the Atlantic weather turned hostile.
It's amazing. It's a perfect example of human necessity driving genetics.
Mm-hmm.
But let's fast forward from those medieval French monasteries to, like, the late 1990s and early 2000s.
The internet era.
Yeah, the bridge to modern cold climate growing is so fascinating. This was the era of the early internet gardening forums. Garden Web, Figs for Fun.
Yeah.
We had this dedicated, almost obsessive subculture of amateur growers in Zone 5 Ontario, upstate New York, connecting online and trading dormant cuttings through the mail.